So let's actually go ahead with the article about, what is it called? The Philosophy and Science of Stoic Free Will. Yeah, which apparently is about the free will, but as I've been going through it the last time, and I'm having to shut the windows so that it is not too loud. As I've seen the last time, it basically is about something that I've been, I've been philosophical about for quite some time, but it is about creating meaning and purpose in life. But yeah, let's actually go ahead. I don't know where I've stopped, but I think that I'm gonna rather quickly. Well, Long provides his, so Long being the author of another article, so not this article, but another article this article is about. Articleception anyway. Long provides his readers with a very good discussion of why he ends up translating prohairesis with volition or volition, whatever. And it is well worth attending to his reasoning. He considers three other options: moral purpose or moral character, will, and agency. He discards the first possibility, because prohairesis can be good or bad, while quote-unquote moral has a positive meaning only. Moreover, the world is tainted by later connotations that would distract and lead us to misunderstand the Stoic meaning. So what about will? He has actually translated prohairesis that way, occasionally, particularly because Epictetus does use phrases like, if you will, you are free. But again, the term has become loaded with especially Christian-influenced meaning, and more importantly, it may lead us to erroneously, is it coming from arrow? Anyway, conclude that Epictetus is thinking of a faculty of the will distinct from assent and impulse, which he is definitely not. Agency, says Long, is a better alternative, and indeed it is the one used by modern Stoic Lawrence Becker throughout his quote-unquote a new Stoicism, about which I have recently published a 10-part commentary. But Long isn't happy with agency either. Consider this passage. And who told you? It is your function to walk in unimpeded? What I was telling you is that the only unimpeded thing is the impulse. Wherever there is a need for the body and the body's cooperation, you have long ago heard that nothing is your own. This causes, what is it? Isn't it 4? I think it is 4. 1.72 to 73. What Epictetus is reminding his students of here is that even our bodily actions are not entirely up to us. We may decide to start walking, but we could be paralyzed by disease or chained to a wall by a tyrant, so the action is not entirely up to us. Only the impulse to perform the function, since quote-unquote agency typically carries the meaning of actually doing things, not just willing them. Then I would have to agree with Long's take. Hence, the final preference for volition, which in modern psychology is quote-unquote the cognitive process by which an individual decides on and commits to a particular course of action. It is defined as purposive striving and is one of the primary human psychological functions. As Long correctly points out, volition is not contradictory to a physicist, not a physicist, but to a physicalist view of the world as determined by cause and effect. Whenever there's something happening, there must be a reason for why it is happening. And so there's always a reason for why we are walking. The question always is where it is stemming from, what the reason is and what the cause is. We often see the effect of things, but we unfortunately very, very, very often don't know the cause of it, which is bad when we're talking about science, and in particular medicine as a science. Because, you can have cancer, but this is the effect and not the cause, But on the other hand, the effect might also be the cause of something else, So the effect of a cause might be the cause for something else. Meaning, if you have cancer, which is the effect of maybe poor, eating habits, maybe poor genes, maybe poor whatever. But this cancer can lead to you dying, which is then the effect of cancer, isn't it? And there's another quote. We take people to have volition irrespective of whether these are predetermined or independent of antecedent causation. Page 220. And moreover, modern psychological science considers volition to be, quote-unquote, a process of conscious action control which becomes automized. See a link just above. But wait a minute. Isn't it a fact of modern science that free will, however one wishes to call it, is an quote-unquote illusion? Specifically, didn't the famous experiments by Benjamin Libet, or Libet, whatever, back in the 1980s conclusively show that to be the case? Does that not mean, therefore, that the entire Stoic philosophy of mind, and hence the crucial idea of the dichotomy of control, is, as expressed by Epictetus at the very beginning of the Enchidrion, crumble under the pounding of modern science? Nope, not at all. On the contrary, Libet's experiments and subsequent others carried out since specularly confirmed the ancient Stoic intuition about prohairesis. Libet performed some fascinating experiments on conscious versus unconscious decision-making beginning back in 1983. I didn't know about that. He asked subjects to follow the movements of a dot on a screen of an oscilloscope. The dot moved like the hands of a clock, but faster. Libet told his subjects to move a finger at a moment of their choice during the experiment, noting the position of the dot when they became aware of their decision to act. The experiment showed that the decision to move the finger entered conscious awareness about 200 milliseconds before the actual movement. But stunningly, there was a rise in the so-called readiness potential, which is thought to be associated with the preparation for action about 550 milliseconds before movement. So the subjects appeared to get ready to move the finger a full 350 milliseconds before they became conscious of their decision to do so. Indeed, in later experiments, the readiness potential has been shown to build up even as long as 1.5 seconds before movement. Taken at face value, Libet's results seem to show that we decide our actions unconsciously, and that what we call consciousness is simply a late awareness of a decision that has been made. So basically, first you do something and then you recognize that you're doing something. There are several well-known criticisms of such conclusion, beginning with the obvious one, that the experimental conditions have precious little to do with is it precise? Pressure? Well, I don't know, little to do with the recursive complex behavior that we normally label, quote-unquote, conscious decision-making, and which is understood as a continuous feedback loop between what Daniel Kahneman calls System 1, which is fast and subconscious, and System 2, which is slow and deliberate, brain processing systems. But in fact, it was Libet himself who rejected the facial quote-unquote free will is an illusion interpretation of his own research. So here's a part of his commentary. Let's see. The finding that the volitional process is initiated unconsciously leads to the question, is there then any role for conscious will in the performance of a voluntary act? The conscious will does appear 150 milliseconds before the motor act. Even though it follows the onset of the cerebral action by at least 400 milliseconds, that allows it, potentially, to affect or control the final outcome of the volitional process. An interval millisecond before a muscle is activated is the time for the primary motor cortex to activate the spinal motor nerve cells and, through them, then the muscles. During this final 50 seconds, the act goes to completion with no possibility of its being stopped by the rest of the cerebral cortex. The conscious will could decide to allow the volitional process to go to completion, resulting in the motor act itself. Or the conscious will could block or veto the process so that no motor act occurs. B.Liebe, or Libet, however, Mind Time, the Temporal Factor in Consciousness, 2004, page 137. Amazing that the author of this article is actually pointing that out, because people who would like to know more could start reading there, which is amazing. Note that the motor cortex in question is part, surprise, surprise. What? Note that the motor cortex in question is part, surprise, surprise, of the frontal lobes, especially, or specifically part of the posterior border of the lobe called the percentral gyrus, Gyrusfleisch, which I have suggested is the anatomical counterpart of both the hegemonikon and enables the faculty of prohairesis. Also, more recent research, summarized here, has led to a reinterpretation of Libet's original findings that align them even more with the intuitions of the Stoics. For instance, a group of researchers in Germany has modified the original protocol to test Libet's idea of a veto power exercised by conscious thought. Bear with me for a minute because some of the details are important. Subjects were asked to hit a foot pedal as quickly as possible after seeing a green light on a screen, but also to stop themselves from doing so, i.e. cancel their own movements whenever a red light appeared. Researchers then put the red light under the control of a computer monitoring the participants' brain waves. The twist was that whenever the computer detected the above-mentioned readiness potential building up, it would make a red light appear. In agreement with Libet's veto hypothesis, participants were in fact able to stop themselves from pushing the pedal, reversing the buildup of the action potential. I see. This is an amazing experiment. This was possible up until a point of no return. If the red light was too close after the green one, about 0.25 seconds, then the foot movement could not be completely inhibited. And there's more. A French team of neuroscientists published a paper in 2012 in the prestigious Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, in which they argued for a different interpretation of Libet's original experiment. They suggested that the readiness potential does not, in fact, signal the brain's preparation for a specific action. Rather, the potential goes up and down randomly, but movement can only occur when a certain threshold in the potential is reached. Sure enough, they conducted an experiment in which they asked subjects to press a button, either at moments of their own choosing or when they heard a random click. The results show that the response to the random clicks were much faster when they happened to coincide with a, again, random surge in the readiness potential than when the potential happened to be when the potential happened to be low. So the potential is not really a sign of an already made unconscious decision, but rather one of a number of co-occurring causes that facilitate the movement. All of the above seems to me eminently compatible with the Stoic take on volition. Please understand that I'm not suggesting that the ancient Stoics somehow anticipated modern neuroscience. That would be preposterous. They knew nothing about action potentials, and they even got particularly or spectacularly wrong the anatomical location of the hegemonikon, because they thought it is the heart, but it's actually the brain. But their intuitive understanding of human psychology, on which they built their moral philosophy of action, was right on target, which makes their philosophy perfectly compatible with modern cognitive science. For another example of such compatibility, this one concerning the Stoic treatment of emotions as cognitively informed, see here. So there's no magic here. The Stoics were simply astute observers of human nature. And to summarize then, the hegemonikon, our ruling faculty, is roughly equivalent to the functions performed by the mammalian frontal lobes, which are particularly developed in the great apes, and that in the human species reach full maturity in our late 20s. Prohairesis is our special faculty of deliberate rational judgment and is made possible by subcomponents of the frontal lobes. Our volition is compatible with the fact that the cosmos is characterized by a universal web of cause and effects, because some of these causes are internally generated, see Chrysippus cylinder, which makes Stoic philosophy of mind a type of compatibilism about quote-unquote free will. And please, let's no longer use that term. Finally, not only there is no contradiction between modern cognitive science and the Stoic idea that some things, namely our judgments, are quote-unquote up to us, it is on the contrary the course that modern science tells us about the anatomical basis and physiological mechanisms underlying prohairesis. It is this congruence between early Stoic intuitions about human psychology and nature and modern science that make their philosophy still so useful today. We can therefore agree with Epictetus when he says, "You're not flesh or hair, but volition. If you keep that beautiful, then you will be beautiful." Discourses 3.1.40. And this is the end of the article and also the end of the episode, and I'm going to see you the next time. Bye-bye.